that the traditional literary space was a bit dull and kind of lonely and quiet, and I wanted there to be sort of a celebration around my work. I wanted there to be life and joy, and it really felt kind of like a cardboard box. It didn't feel like it was a living house. And social media helped with that, I have to say. And I started sharing, what I was reading and what I was writing, and that brought some joy. And then when I read about Web3, it just made so much sense because I was already doing that. I was already sharing my work as little videos. So why not transact them? All of a sudden, that seemed like a possibility, and it seemed like a really exciting possibility. And I'm a lifelong student. I believe in going to school at whatever age. I'm currently pursuing an MFA. I've been doing it for many years, very slowly. I'm the oldest student in most of my classes. And I have a day job. I've had a day job for a long time. But I'm around all these poets that are really just starting out, and they're all struggling to get it out of their MFA as quickly as possible, to find a job, to find work, to find income, because there really isn't an option to make a living as a poet. And here I don't count teaching poetry as making a living as a poet. That you're a professor, which is a valid and a fantastic career. But as many of my professors have said, I teach to sustain my writing habit. If I could, I would just write all day long, and I wouldn't necessarily be a teacher, as much joy as it brings me. So I also wanted to share the poems of my fellow students and professors, who I owe so much to. So I wanted to start a gallery, a poetry gallery, and I pitched it to a few people, and they all sort of looked at me and didn't really understand, until I met two fabulous women in the space, one of whom has also been an artist in residence, Kalani Wamoto and Sasha Stiles. I'm sure many of you know, love, and admire them as I do. And they totally got it and were like, yeah, let's do this. And so we started the Verse. And, it's ironic that this morning Micol posted something about being a pioneer, what that requires. And for me, it just requires being a beginner, having a beginner mindset, in the sense that once you think you know how to do things, I feel like you don't. And you're just going to repeat, and it's just going to be more of the same. But because we were doing something new and we had no idea what we were doing, and many days we still don't, we were able to, I think, do something really special and fresh and different, and really inviting, in a way that maintains a level of innocence and play, but also, of course, thoughtfulness and depth. And we're lucky to have poets like Christian, who is, I think you guys probably have met Christian already, and a brilliant, brilliant mind and fantastic soul with lots of humor in there, which I really appreciate. And yeah, so that was the Verse. I'm happy to ask questions about being a founder, about we applied for funding, and we were fortunate to receive some. Of course, all the wells of funding in the crypto space come and go, with the ebb and flow of the markets. Unfortunately, there's a tethering there that I wish I could cut. So the situation has changed a little bit since we applied for funding, but I'm happy to ask questions about that. I've minted work, I think, on all the platforms, basically, I think, as a beginner, as an artist starting out. So I'm happy to ask questions about the different platforms. I've minted on Async, on Super Rare, on Maker's Place, on Tezos, on all the Tezos platforms, on FX Hash. So if there's questions on that, I'm really happy to answer that. Basic, sort of embarrassing, quote unquote, questions, I'm happy to dive into those. I've also attended many events and can share thoughts on which ones I think are worth going, which ones perhaps are not worth going. The importance of going. I know it's difficult, and all of us have different, like day-to-day realities, but That's definitely a factor, I think, in this whole Web3 world is IRL events. I've also spent a lot of time on Twitter Spaces, for better or for worse, and can share my thoughts on the value of Twitter Space, on building community in social media. I think, as a mentor, I can provide some guidance on these topics, not extreme guidance, but the best I can do. So I do want to offer space and time for questions, if you guys have any. I don't necessarily think that I need to speak about my work and my poetry and my books, unless you guys are interested in learning about that. I'm more really interested in learning about you guys and what you want and what you hope to gain, or discover in this space. So if no one has any questions, you can dive into the writing exercise that I had suggested. I'm going to look to see if there's any questions in our channel, but I don't see any.
I've got a question.
Right? Okay. Go, Christian.
Anna, you said that you would be willing to divulge, based on your experience, what kinds of events are worthy of attendance and what events are not. Do you mind telling us, of the events that you've attended, which would you recommend for our cohort, many of whom are scattered around the world, that would give us the greatest bang for our buck by virtue of attending? Should we go to NFT New York or NFT Paris? Should you show up at the Art Basel Miami? What constitutes the most lucrative or important event for you? What turned out to be the best place to meet the likes of us?
I think it depends where you have your community. So to go to an event without really having sort of like an anchor, I think could be really disorienting. And there's a lot of people, and everyone's sort of like, there's a bit of a scramble energy, which I find a little bit tiring. So it's really, I think, valuable to go to events where you already have a community in place, that can ground you and that you haven't perhaps met. So as VCA residents, I would strongly suggest going to VCA events, which are fortunately, coincidentally, some of the best. So for example, the upcoming Proof of People in New York, which will be concurrent with NFT NYC, which will draw its own crowd, I think could be a great use of resources, because of course you can potentially reach out to Mikol and to Boria and to the rest of your fellow alums and mentors, and maybe be able to exhibit work or have a really meaningful coffee with somebody, and you won't kind of just be like pinballing, in a way that you're not sure if you learned, if you connected. So I would say, for example, an event for me that was super, super meaningful was that non-fun, what was it? The one in Mexico, the non-NFT conference that Neurocolor organized in Mexico City, because I am very rooted in my my Latin background, and I grew up in Colombia, and I love being around sort of the Latin community. I love the energy and the vibrancy of it. I feel very much at home there. So when Neuro invited me to go to his conference, I wasn't really sure. I had just met him, and I'm so happy I went, because I really connected with the energy of Mexico and the artists there, and I feel like I made lifelong friends, in a way that goes beyond my goals or dreams as an artist. Like my human self was nourished. So Christian as a poet, maybe there's events that intersect. I'm sure with the verse we'll try to provide those, but that intersect your poet self, your human self, and your crypto Web3 artist self, in a way that you come away feeling, oh, that was fantastic. I would do that again in a heartbeat. It was worth every penny. It was worth all the effort. Those kinds of events are great. For now, like, there's so many conferences. So there's the one in Lisbon, there's the one in Europe, there's the one, in Valencia, there's the one in Paris. And unless you're getting invited in a way that the conference is paying for you to go, which is happening actually, or you have a speaking within the schedule of the conference, you have a speaking invitation, where you get to share your thoughts in a meaningful way. I would say all these are going to start to kind of fuse together in our minds as very, very similar events. Does that make sense to everyone? Is that helpful?
Yeah, it's helpful. I think it was actually probably a pretty obvious answer to imagine hanging out with fellows from the VCA residency. It's probably a good advice. And I suspect that there's probably lots of people here who could probably get access to many of these European venues that you've mentioned. It's actually heartening advice to hear. Thanks.
I wanted to follow up on that. And Ana, I admire you so much. You're one of those people that I really respect. And when I came in here, just kept an eye on everything you did. And yeah, and somos colombianas las dos. Bueno, okay. So I wanted to follow up on that question because I was actually wondering something that you sort of answered, but maybe we can touch on funding to go to these events. I mean, it's hard. It's not easy for everybody to just go and be in these events. And what I'm getting from what you said is, that they're all going to bleed together. It doesn't matter where they're at, unless you're going for some meaningful connection or you're invited as a speaker or something like that. But I did have this question actually before today, just because Proof of People was my favorite event that I have observed on Twitter, and I'm so happy it's going to be in New York, so that's much more doable. But I am wondering about, also you mentioned about the scholarship or the funding that you got for your Versaverse. So maybe if you can just talk a little bit more about that in terms of attending events.
Yes, so we've received funding from the Versaverse, and all this is public information. We received a Tezos Foundation grant to advance our work of, sort of making a home for poetry on the blockchain. And that's been, without the Tezos grant, I don't think the Versaverse would have been able to do half of or 80% of what we've done. We're incredibly grateful to Tezos. They're incredibly supportive force in the space. I know VCA also has worked with Tezos and feels in a similar capacity as we do. But I do know that those Tezos grants are getting harder and harder to come by just because of we all know it. We're not in the best market situation right now, so everyone feels it. From the bottom to the top. So I think those grants, unless you have sort of like this overarching, organization like VCA, like the Versaverse, that is going to go to these events, put forth a message, a performance, an exhibition, for example, will be launching a new exhibition of poetry in Spanish at Proof of People on Tezos in New York, in partnership with Refraction and Vertical Crypto, that we're really, really excited about. Unless you have sort of these overarching, bigger than me kind of, I think, pitches, it's going to be hard, of course, to receive funding. We've also received funding, so keep an eye out because they are going to have a second call, is Refraction, an amazing, amazing organization. They put out creative grants, and we also received a creative grant. We applied for one. These applications are a lot of work, but they can make the difference. We were able to hire a curator based in Havana, pay her a fee, pay a translator, a professional translator for our original Poesía de Protesta exhibition, pay a production fee, have quality printout catalogs, all the sorts of things that really contribute to creating a high quality exhibition we were able to do because of that creative grant. And then, there's a friend and fellow poet at the Verse who also has been an alum of VCA, who's Nathaniel Stern. And he always says, Anna, I think artists need to think local. And recently, I've connected with a local county cultural arts division, and I'm really happy to share that they gave us funding that is also going to help with the production of Poesía de Protesta. This is just Broward County in Florida, and they've supposedly they want to meet to give us future funding. So I guess that gives you sort of the three different venues, right? There's like the larger Tezos type grants that you can apply for, and there's the local, which I think for me has been really rewarding to work with my local sort of city or county, and then there's the festival level or the private organizations such as Refraction. But there are definitely invitations, and then and there's some of these events that are starting to pay people to go to speak, the ones that are really organized. So I was offered to be flown out to go speak at one of these events. So I think that's a possibility if you really, Marta, as a performance artist, you have something so unique to offer the space. So if you really sort of hone in on that practice, on the uniqueness of your offering, and maybe sort of represent the craft of performance art, becoming a transactable event via the blockchain, I don't see why that couldn't happen.
Yes, thank you. Yep. Thank you, Ana Maria. Actually, my work is kind of between, it's performance, installation, and drawing. It's, it's a merging of things. So it doesn't fit into it. I mean, I think that's part of the quality of it, is that it's its own thing in that way. So I guess I'll work on pitching that. But thank you. I was curious if you have somebody in your team that's a grant writer. Are you guys doing all that?
No, yeah, we kind of do all that internally, just together. It is a lot of work, but it's proven fruitful.
You have a great group. It's amazing. I'm so I admire the team that came together. It's it's admirable. Thank you.
Of course.
Hi, Ana. It's Danielle. How are you?
Hi. How are you, Danielle?
I'm doing well. I'm so happy to virtually see you here. I had a question for you. You have done a number of really great collaborations with other artists, and collaboration is something that I'm just super excited about. As a collector, I love seeing when two artists, put their brains together, what they come up with. And as an artist, it's something I'm excited to, to try doing. But I'm wondering sort of like how you approach those, and what, if any, sort of like bumps in the road or advice you would have around collaborating with other artists.
That's a great question. I really haven't had a negative experience, I have to say. I think there's a lot of intuition for me that is involved in collabing with someone, and if it just feels right, it feels like we both have sort of our hearts in the same place and want to create something great. And then usually when I'm collabing with someone, like, we're not even thinking about the price or like the additions or any of that until something has been cooked. And then we start thinking, about like portion size and divvying it up. But when there's really just a focus on creating something beautiful together, I feel like you really can't go wrong. And it's wonderful because then you have two people also sort of pushing, this project along, and everyone brings in their own community. and their own sort of fan base, and their own spin to it. And then you also kind of like made a friend in, that maybe you've never met. So I'm working right now, for example, with this artist in Buenos Aires who I met at the Neurocolor conference. I loved his piece. He's from CryptoArg. I really encourage everyone to take a look at what CryptoArg is doing. I think they do really cool stuff quietly and thoughtfully, and differently. And so, we connected over Twitter, and I was invited to be part of a art fair in Spain. And I said, hey, would you like to do something? And we're creating a piece, and it's like we haven't even talked about, how many editions or how we're going to price it, and it's just like back and forth, and it's so amazing. And I don't know, it's been such a wonderful experience to collab with different artists. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's something really unique to Web3. Like, you don't necessarily see too many artist collabs, like I think in the traditional world, and you don't really see a lot of poet writer collabs either. It's something that I spoke about, I think, in an interview recently, how it's only just starting, how poets are starting to say, hey, maybe we can write poetry together or short stories together, and wouldn't that be interesting? And for some reason, I think academic papers get written by several minds normally, and that's accepted. But for some reason, people, I don't think, understand that when there's a collab, like it's double the magic. It really is. And then the pleasure of sharing the piece together, is I think a big part of the joy. So not only like the front end, but the back end is also a wonderful experience, I would have to say.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that idea of intuition and like, do you feel like your hearts are aligned is something that I will definitely keep in mind, because I think you're right. Like, before you even get into any of the nitty gritty details, it needs to feel good, and it needs to feel like, this is somebody who, you spend a lot of time going back and forth with them and creating this thing together. So yeah, that was really helpful. Thanks, Ana.
Sure. And then I think also for me, something that's been really fun is collabing with really different artists. So not one style, like dancers, video artists, glitch, like all that is just then you end up learning about different practices too. And start thinking about going into different directions with your own visual work. So I think that's also something interesting. I don't know if you have any more questions.
I don't know if I mentioned this, but I mentioned right now. My cousin is she's I don't know exactly what her title is, but she's in charge at the Library of Congress, and she's in charge of the poetry of Latin American poets, and she's creating a digital archive. And I've thought about connecting the two of you. I think I mentioned her to you. I don't know if I mentioned you to her, but that comes to mind right now. Something that could be interesting. She's Colombian as well, so yeah, it might be a good connection to make.
Amazing. No, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, between two very different worlds, but dealing with similar things in a way. Yeah, she's creating this like audio archives of poetry, dating the history of poetry and it may be I believe it's Latin American art poetry.
Oh wow, I love that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Martha, for thinking of me.
Yeah, of course. I would really love to connect you guys.